Is Anthony Joshua really back to his best? Or is his current run of form simply the result of clever matchmaking? Some people believe that AJ is actually over the hill and he's just been flattered by his recent opposition. But what's the truth of it? Well, on paper, Otto Wallin was a perfectly credible opponent. He went the distance with Tyson Fury a few years ago and gave him problems. More recently, he beat former cruiserweight champion Murat Gassiev, whose only prior loss was to Alexander Usyk. And going into the Joshua fight, Wallin was highly ranked, so as I say, it was a credible opponent on paper. However, AJ and Wallin had shared many rounds together in sparring over the years, and according to Richie Woodall, AJ nearly always got the better of it. He said AJ was so dominant against Wallin in the gym that he sometimes got the impression that AJ was having to hold back just so he could get the rounds in. In light of that information, it's not so surprising that AJ put in a confident performance against Otto Wallin in their professional fight. And as for Ngannou, I always said that AJ would handle him comfortably and wouldn't have any trouble at all. Ngannou was flattered by the performance he put in against the completely out of shape Tyson Fury. I said that all along. So yes, in my view, Anthony Joshua has benefited from clever matchmaking lately. Does that then mean that he's not really back to his best and might instead actually be over the hill? Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can benefit from clever matchmaking, but also be back to your best at the same time. Ultimately, we won't know whether or not AJ's back to his best until September 21st, because in Daniel Dubois, he's going up against a young, hungry, powerful, and aggressive fighter who's got bags of energy and superior stamina. He's willing to take risks to land his own shots. He's also beaten better recent opposition than Anthony Joshua has. Yes, AJ has sparred Dubois in the past as well, but unlike his sessions with Otto Wallin, AJ didn't have it all his own way with Daniel Dubois. He never denied that Dubois hurt him. He denied being dropped, but he never denied being hurt. So how much confidence could AJ really take from sparring Dubois? It's very different to the Otto Wallin situation. The Wallin and Ngannou fights served as confidence builders for AJ more than anything else. And being confident, of course, is vitally important. No matter how talented or technical you are, if you don't have confidence, you're going to underperform. I suspect that the Wallin and Ngannou fights have been successful in raising AJ's confidence. In addition to that, AJ's made some tweaks to his game under Ben Davison. One of the things that Eddie Hearn keeps saying lately is that AJ's hitting harder than ever. Now, obviously, promoters are notorious for making hyperbolic statements about their fighters, saying things about them which may not be true. But in this particular instance, I suspect that Eddie Hearn actually is telling the truth. I think AJ probably is hitting harder than ever, and there's a secret to it. You see, early on in AJ's career, he was primarily a lead puncher. He liked to throw his punches before his opponent. His whole game was to overwhelm you with power, speed, and brute force, and he was successful doing that for a while. But as a lead puncher, you're often throwing punches when your opponent has his guard up. So he's always poised to block, slip, and counter you. Therefore, you're banking on the idea that you're going to be able to punch through your opponent's guard, or at least break him down, before you get tired, or before you get caught with a fight-ending counter. That's the gamble when you're a lead puncher. In order to be successful with that approach at world level over the long haul of a career, you're going to need at least two of the following three attributes. Number one, a great chin. Number two, a great defense. And number three, great stamina. Problem is, AJ doesn't have any of those attributes. He doesn't have a great chin. I'd say it's average. Not bad, just average. For some bizarre reason, in this day and age, there's a lot of people who don't seem to understand what the word average means. It does not mean bad, okay? AJ's also never had a great defense, certainly not on the front foot. There's only a handful of aggressive fighters that ever had a great defense, and AJ was certainly never one of them. He also never had great stamina. Yes, he's learned to pace himself better over the years, but he's never going to be a guy who can keep up a high work rate for 12 rounds. His physiology simply won't allow for it. This is why AJ was getting hurt by the likes of Dylan White, Vladimir Klitschko, Alexander Povetkin, and ultimately why he lost to Andy Ruiz. He was living on borrowed time, fighting with his old style. And I said so at the time in many, many videos when he was still undefeated. I was urging him to leave Rob McCracken. After the Ruiz loss, AJ became hesitant to sit down on his punches. The Ruiz rematch is a great example where AJ was literally just throwing arm punches throughout the fight. Now, while that worked well enough off against a short, slow-footed Andy Ruiz, he was never going to be able to get away with that over the long haul against different styles at world level. He was never going to be able to outbox everyone. He was going to have to plant his feet and get stuck in again at some point. His failure to do so was evident in both Usyk fights, but particularly the first one. He wasn't committing to his shots because he was afraid of the counters. Similar thing against Jermaine Franklin, albeit against a much lower level of opponent. He did commit against Robert Helenius, but only really at the very end of that fight. What Ben Davison has done is show AJ a way that he can fully commit to his shots while still remaining relatively safe. And the secret to that is in something that I've always said AJ had a natural talent for, which is counterpunching. There's a common misconception that being a counterpuncher means boxing on the back foot and moving around. But in fact, there is such a thing as an aggressive counterpuncher, a front foot counterpuncher. Andy Ruiz for many years was a good example of one. Not that AJ is going to fight just like Andy Ruiz, not at all, but the basic principle of allowing your opponents to lead off and then punishing their mistakes is something that can work for Anthony Joshua for two reasons. Number one, because he has a natural talent for it, and number two, it gives him the confidence to commit to his punches more. You see, as I explained earlier, as a lead puncher, you know that your opponent is usually poised to block, slip, or counter. You know that. And when you load up on a shot, there tends to be more of a tell than there would be if you just threw an arm punch. So your opponent can more easily anticipate it. And when a fighter gets punished for loading up on a lead, as AJ was against Andy Ruiz, they can become hesitant to throw shots from there on in. And the shots they do throw don't have as much power on them because they're not fully committing. The beauty of counterpunching is that loading up on shots is less of a gamble. You're going to wait until your opponent throws. You're going to use feints or foot pressure or even a jab to trigger him to throw first. At which point, there's a gap in his defense. He's no longer poised to defend himself. He's now open. He's now vulnerable. You've now got the drop on him. If you're quick enough, you can learn how to slip, load up, and detonate a counter in a split second with tremendous force. This is what I suspect Ben Davison has been working on the most, getting AJ to commit to his counter punches. You may have noticed that Ben Davison is constantly talking about how underrated AJ's counter punching ability is. I think he knows that AJ is quite vulnerable as a lead, but as a counter, I think he's managed to convince AJ that it's much safer to load up and commit. And I don't think any of AJ's previous trainers really did that. They never really developed that particular aspect of his game as much as they could have. Again, it's not just about AJ throwing counters. He's always thrown counters. It's about training him to throw counters that are designed to end a fight. And that's what I see in all this training footage with Ben Davison. Maximum rotation, leaning into the shots, and so on. Against Francis Ngannou, the first knockdown was off a quick lead right hand. It was a hard shot, but it wasn't thrown with the kind of force as the punch which produced the second knockdown, which was a counter right hand over Ngannou's jab. The final punch of the fight was academic, really, because Ngannou was gone and AJ knew it, so he knew he didn't need to wait for Ngannou to lead. He knew it was safe to load up and throw first. Anyway, to sum up, yes, AJ has been cleverly matched of late, but he needed those confidence builders. It's part of the rebuilding process. Mike Tyson did it, Lennox Lewis did it, and many other great fighters after they suffered defeat. It's a tried and tested method. But confident or not, we'll find out whether AJ is better than ever or over the hill on September 21st. And before I go, make sure you check out my Joshua Dubois film study on my Patreon page. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. I analyze actual video footage of several of their fights and do a technical breakdown of their respective strengths and weaknesses and discuss tactics. If you want to access this video along with hundreds of hours worth of other exclusive boxing content as well as our members chat, just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called the Boxing Brotherhood. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store. All the links are in the description box below.